It's time for Talking Pictures Trivia. A quick friendly reminder, Laserdiscs are actually analog and more similar to vinyl records than a CD.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of geographically challenged friends explore movies through trivia as an excuse to keep their friendships alive. I'm one of these friends and today's host, Nick, and with me is...
Tom.
And KJ.
Additionally, joining us as a guest this week is...
Doug.
Thanks for joining us today. You may remember Doug from prior episodes such as Solaris, The Fugitive, Get Out, and Ghostbusters. Hey, Doug, do you still conveniently like movies?
Why, yes, I conveniently do.
All right. For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with a movie quiz, as these pivotal questions will determine who earns today's trivia crown. In round one, each question is worth 1 point, and in round two, each question is worth 2 points. Then, once the fierce competition is over, we followed up with our famous movie rant where anything goes. Tom, tell us about today's movie.
Today we are going back to 1999 when the Wachowskis released their second film, The Matrix, which was released in theaters alongside Analyze This, Cruel Intentions, 10 Things I Hate About You, and David Cronenberg's Existence, with a few letters capitalized in odd places in the title to ensure that you know it's the 90s. Nick will be quizzing us today. Nick, what is today's movie all about?
In my opinion, The Matrix was and remains a big deal. This film ushered in a new wave in modern cinema, specifically regarding the expectation of special effects in movies. The world is not what it seems, and Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, somehow knows it. Through some clever references to Alice in Wonderland, Neo will learn the truth of his suspicions and discover he may have a larger part to play in history than he could have ever imagined. Is Neo the one? Let's find out in one solid movie, and then, if you have the stomach for it, have the realization confirmed in the subsequent films. Tom, if you only had one word to describe The Matrix, what would it be?
Binary. KJ?
Sensory. Doug?
Fate.
And my word would be, whoa.
It's time for question one.
What is the question?
Locked in.
Locked in.
Locked in?
Tom goes first.
What is The Matrix?
KJ?
Unfortunately, Tom, no one can be when are we?
Doug?
What is the Matrix?
Doug and Tom are getting the points. There was a very big part in this film where they're like, you know the question. And he goes, what is the Matrix?
Huh. Because there's another scene where Neo wakes up and says, where are we? And Morpheus says, it's not where we are, it's when we are, something. So I thought, oh yeah, what is the Matrix?
That did happen, but they literally
That's not
said
That's
also,
not the question.
what is the question? What is the Matrix is the question, and why we're watching this film. But really, I wanted to pivot this into talking about Neo and the Nebuchadnezzar crew, including Morpheus, Trinity, and others.
Real quick before we get into that. So one of the other things about when this movie came out back in 99, it was one of the first movies I remember that had a website. Movies may have had it before this, but it was kind of early on the internet. And the website was www.whatisthematrix.com. So it's
What is the question?
No, it was.
That's pretty pivotal. It was their key marketing ploy. It wasn't.
Yeah, it was also in
the question is when. Or whatever.
Yeah, it was also in the previews, and that was what was attractive about the previews.
Yeah.
You want to know? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the crew is fine. I mean, it's a standard kind of crew dynamic, right? Where you have like the little guy and the big kind of friendly guy and the leader and then the hero. I found it interesting why it was called the Nebuchadnezzar, which I really couldn't scratch. I have a reading of why it's called the Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, that was the Nebuchadnezzar II was the king responsible for the Babylonian captivity. When I first watched it, I was like, why is this ship called this? But I think...
But what's the actual reason, Tom? I know who he is. I know it's a reference to someone.
Yeah.
Do you have the?
I have a reason that's fairly B-side length and
Give us like the quick
Too
snapshot.
long, didn't read.
Yeah. I think it's something along the lines of the various religious allegories that are going on in this movie are what are offered as an escape from the Matrix. That in fact it isn't necessarily the red pill that does it, that it's some sort of belief or belief in faith. And I think the religious allegories sort of indicate that. Why the Nebuchadnezzar, like destroyed Solomon's temple and imprisoned the Jews? I have no idea. But
I just cheated and looked it up on the internet.
Yeah.
So from, again, random sources on the internet, it's saying that it represents the machine's arrogance in claiming godliness, similar to the ancient king. As well as the fact that they were rebels, or warriors who were attempting to liberate their people. So that's what the interwebs say.
Right. So I guess they named
but in line what you said. I mean, it's in line.
It's a little bit. I mean, it's so they named their ship after the imprisoner. Yeah, that's a little odd, but yeah, sure. That makes sense.
Well, technically, they inherited that ship, but we'll go into that later because it may be relevant to further questions.
Maybe it would have made more sense if that was their nickname for like one of the machine ships, but to name their own ship, that really doesn't make sense other than to stick in a cool name with a obscure reference into the movie.
I think they just the writers just thought it looked cool or sounded cool.
I guess they could have called it the Babylonian. That would have been,
Or John the Baptist.
Oh God, yeah. Is Morpheus's real first name John? Is that how this?
Because he's the guy with the faith, right? He is constantly. That's what he's talking about, is the faith.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole faith structure here, right? There's these believers. They live in captivity. They have their own kind of Babylonian captivity. There's some people who are believers and some people aren't. Which has kind of a relevance there because, you could be culturally Jewish or religiously so, or both. So yeah, the kind of faith structure and how faith works is obviously present in this film, probably more in this film than the latter two, except for the third one where it just kind of gets a little steroid jump and goes out of control. But I do think the faith is necessary for this movie to make sense. And the kind of problems I have with it are somewhat corrected or fixed if you think of faith as a way out of the Matrix, as opposed to, whatever, a pill or a collection of well-meaning rebels.
Well, because that's what Morpheus wants, right? He wants to end the Matrix and free everybody, and it's his faith that he's using it to do that. Now, so Neo, right? Thomas Anderson, is he doubting Thomas? Are we going that far as to? He didn't really.
Does he ever
him.
doubt?
I mean, well, after
Thomas,
I think the Oracle talks to him. He doubts.
Thomas
but...
is also the twin.
Okay.
Thomas is the twin of he's so called because he supposedly looks like Christ so very much.
Oh, there you go. Keanu Reeves,
yeah.
Definitely. If I had to pick well, we shouldn't get into that. So who else on the crew here? We got Cipher. His faith is a little different, right? I guess
he's our Judas,
lack
right?
Thereof.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, no. This is getting dangerous. I'm going to cut this, but in my head, I grew up on Jesus Christ Superstar, so I'm like, Judas, it wasn't Judas's fault. Like, I never understood why Judas was this bad guy. All right, so, but Cipher...
Have you ever read anything in the Bible?
I took Bible studies
An
in college, but we didn't, I guess, get into... God told him to do it. Anyway, all right, so...
what part is actually the...
That's there is a Gospel of Judas that posits that.
Yeah. Well, I know. Well, that's what I'm nervous about getting too religious, so maybe we'll keep it. Maybe we'll cut it. Yeah,
just talk about something else. We got Alice in Wonderland. We got a million things.
Yeah, we have Baudrillard, but the movie is religious.
So keep going through other people's faith. So Cipher, I guess, if he was faithful, he got out of the Matrix. But now, He's the one that absolutely does not believe that Neo is the one.
I don't think he's faithful. I think he feels he got swindled and duped out of the Matrix. He didn't believe the test was fair, which I actually would be curious what you guys think. It's kind of vague. And once you're out, you're out. And you got a crosshair on you for the rest of your life as you go around in your hovercraft through the sewers.
Yeah, and I guess that's what's interesting about Cipher is he might reject the idea of the one, but he doesn't see the Matrix as kind of truth or whatever. He's just willing to turn his back on salvation.
The rest of the crew has faith in Morpheus, even if their faith might not be with Neo. Their relationship with their captain is a little different than other sci-fi relationships with a captain and a.
Yeah, Morpheus is a prophet. He speaks as a prophet. But who doesn't think Neo's the one? They all sort of do that, right?
Well, so Trinity questions it, but in the end, her faith is the reason. Like that's the answer to the movie, right? That's what solves this all. So I'd say Trinity also isn't quite sure.
Cipher also is jealous at one point too, in a weird way, because I think he has a thing for Trinity, and all of a sudden this new hotshot comes in and everyone's praising him. Meanwhile, he's been dealing with this lifestyle for quite some time.
I got the impression that Trinity was with Cipher before she got the prediction from the Oracle that she would fall in love with the one. And then I think when that happens, but I don't know how much of this is true, but I got the impression that, she dumped him for Neo, essentially.
See, I got more of a unrequited love situation, because when she was lying there plugged into the Matrix and he was unplugging people, he was looking over her like wantingly and saying things that made it sound like she was unattainable and what was right around her, and she missed it. So I don't think that was ever a relationship. I think it's something he wanted.
Yeah. Okay.
I said I got that too. It also comes off as a little forced, I think I think wanting to get back into the Matrix is really interesting, because he's the only character we meet who wants to go back in, or who wants to take the blue pill. There is something absolutely compelling, I think, especially for young people watching this, and maybe for anybody to take the red pill and to see what is really there.
It's time for question 2.
What is the Matrix?
Locked in?
KJ, did you watch this movie?
Yeah.
Okay, just check. No, just the lack of confidence. So you've watched every material Matrix adjacent or related.
Locked in. I don't remember the exact words used. That's the issue. But
I'm
Tom,
going to say I'm trying to say locked in. Yeah.
Now, if everyone's not confident in their locked in, I will give one clue.
Okay.
Everyone has to agree.
Yeah, let's hear it. I'll hear a clue. Yeah.
Sure.
I could use a clue.
That was a very low sure by Doug, but I'll take it. The answer is one word.
I'm going to lock in. I think I actually locked this in.
Tom is now the first locked in the revised lock-in schedule.
Because there's two possible answers I could think of. One resonates better as a single word. I probably have them both wrong, though. So,
Probably not.
I guess locked in. I was in better shape before the clue.
All right. I guess I'm locked in.
Okay. You got to think in this terms of the movie. And what would Morpheus answer to such a question? Tom. Oh, no. I'm sorry. Doug is first.
All right. I'm not sure about the one word thing, but I would say it's the world around you, or the world that you're led to believe.
KJ.
So originally I thought it was, unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix. That's more James Earl Jones, but you have to experience it for yourself. You can't be told what the Matrix is. But if I had to pick one word, I guess simulation.
It's a good word.
That's a good word. Yeah.
Tom?
That's what it is. Yeah. I think I'm going to say everything.
Unfortunately, there will be no points
Well,
awarded.
was it
This
everywhere?
is both of these are legitimate, like direct from the film. Control. The
Oh,
Matrix is control. That's the whole
Mhm.
theory, the whole philosophy
Okay.
over what that system entails for humanity.
Mhm.
And the reason I brought this one up is I wanted to talk about this film's depiction and portrayal of the Matrix and also technology in general, because it's an interesting time capsule of where technology was in the world when this movie came out and what we thought futuristic technology would be, but also integrated into, dare I say, outdated technology. So it's an interesting vibe.
There's an interesting irony in this. So if you kind of look at the sources of the Matrix, did everybody read about? I don't know if anybody knows what was required reading for the actors. Um, was Jean Baudrillard's simulation and simulacrum and simulation, which sort of uh, posits a number of things. But one thing he talks about in a chapter in that book on science fiction is that in like older utopian tales, so you think Thomas More or Margaret Cavendish, there's like this fantasy world and there's the regular world, and they're like impossibly divided. And what science fiction does, and he has this chapter, simulation and science fiction, is that science fiction allows us to imagine this future world as an extension or an outgrowth of that which already exists. And so the kind of technocratic system that Baudrillard would propose we're all kind of living in, science fiction sort of embraces that, critiques that, or whatnot. But it's this idea that that the kind of hyper reality that technology makes, that science fiction kind of celebrates that, and it sort of perpetuates that. It makes us not aware of the real, right? It helps with that. And what's interesting is the Matrix attempts to make kind of critiques of the world we live in, right? We live in a hyper reality, we live in a matrix, we don't live in the real. But in order to do that, they have to do the best science fiction technology stuff ever. So the movie, in a sense, replicates and creates the thing it's trying to critique or destroy. So it kind of the science fiction element of it ends up, I think, being highly ironic.
I don't know, Tom. But to go back to kind of what Nick was saying, the technology in the movie, I think their get out of jail free card was they say the machine said the height of our civilization was 1999, and that's why the technology is where it is, right? In the Matrix, certainly that makes sense because they're saying it's 1999. They're limiting it to that. And then outside the Matrix, you kind of have this the Rebels and Star Wars feel where they're doing the best they can. So the technology is what it is. They can only build so much because they don't have very many resources. So maybe they're scrapping more. So I thought it kind of worked. What did you think, Nick? What was your? Did you see any discrepancies or?
Well, it's funny you should ask that. I'm actually curious. I know you said you watched this with your daughters. I'm curious what their lens would be through this movie, because the technology that we grew up with, most younger people did not. Think about how they're traveling in and out of the Matrix. They're using phone booths, okay? Pay phones, any kind of phone wires. This is modem technology in which they're transferring inside and outside of this Matrix. It's quite fascinating when you actually think about how this system works. And would people really understand that today? I know the reason we're doing all this is there is a reboot of Matrix 4, and I'm really curious how they're going to update it to this time frame if they're trying to do the same type of technology.
Well, I think because they said it's 1999, right? If we watch a movie and there's buggy whips, we're not like, oh my God, what is that? What are they using that buggy whip? How does the buggy whip work, right? It's not too hard to figure out why there was a phone booth, how a phone works. I think we like to think, oh my gosh, these kids are not going to figure out. They're going to look at that save icon and be like, oh, why is it that? And it's going to be this marvel of a thing. But I think they can They can connect the dots.
They got it.
Yeah, they got it.
Got
Yeah,
it. Yeah. It's just funny to me. I'm curious if a different audience would view it in a different way, just because that's not the world that they grew up in, whereas we did. I think it's because it's not so far away. Just like you said, horse and buggy, we take that for granted. But I guess for us, it's not that far away because we lived through it. But I am curious if a new audience would look at that and just accept it.
I guess there could be nuances, right? Like if somebody was on, if they were using phones and there was a busy signal, right? That would have to be explained because that's kind of a tougher thing to understand. But I think the Matrix stayed pretty, they didn't get into the nuances of 1999.
Yeah, I think I'm talking more about modem technology. I think that's really what it came down to.
It isn't, it's oddly, it's not like a tech display, right? You don't get the explanation that you would in maybe a Star Trek about how this or that piece of technology works. The technology is sort of total, right? It's everywhere, and they need to use phone booths because that creates kind of dramatic
landlines too. They have cell phones, but you can't use you need that landline.
Yeah, and that helps, right? That helps motivate a lot of the action sequences. And so I think I think the movie is more about kind of the idea of tech than any particular technology, and that's why it seems, even when watching it now, pretty timeless. It does not feel as if we're losing something because we don't have smartphones in it. They're kind of living in a smartphone after all.
Maybe that should have been the marketing.
Was there a website on that?
Live in your smartphone.
We do.
Yeah, well, we kind of do. I mean, the I'm gonna rant. I was gonna say
like a B-side to me.
Yeah, well, but it is. I mean, if you think of it as the tech as prophecy, the Matrix is kind of being somewhat prophetic. This is not a great, brilliant remark on my part. But the smartphones do form the contemporary Matrix or the real Matrix, and it is. It's interesting that while the Matrix does posit a real and an unreal, and that there are at least some people who know it's real and unreal, the smartphone does not make such clear distinctions. It's actually more cruel. Yeah.
I will say, with this new movie coming on, Matrix 4, forget the plot line. I'm actually just curious how they're going to deal with technology. That I don't know why. I'm just like really obsessed with seeing how their depiction is, how they're getting in and out of the Matrix. I'm curious if they are updating it with this reboot. Literally, I think it's a Matrix reboot. So we'll see. We are going to be covering that in one of our future upcoming episodes.
Are they just redoing the first one?
No, it's a fourth movie.
No, the Matrix reboots.
Oh, okay. Right? Oh, is it the? Oh, okay. Oh,
that's not the name of it.
It's Resurrections.
Yes.
Is yeah. Mm-hmm. Because the two main characters died. And strangely, some of the characters who lived are not reappearing. So I hope it's not like a Lost style.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
Oh, and Tom, going back to your simulation sacrulation. I don't remember the second word. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Simulacrum.
Yeah. So I did not. You had sent out, hey, here's what they read, and you had sent a few articles. I've not, but I have listened to your excellent B-side on it. So I recommend everybody go check out the Tom B-side of.
So now I have to make
plug.
it.
No, you did it for was it Back to the Future
I did.
2? Yeah. So
yeah, Back to the Future 2. Yeah, I'll make another one. I have the, what's it called? Anyway, let's.
At the end of round 1, we have Tom and Doug tied at 1 point each. I'm sure there's going to be more points being delivered in round 2. Right after these messages from our valued sponsor. Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of
B-side.
KJ here from Talking Pictures Trivia, and I'd like to tell you about Talking Pictures Trivia B-side. Can't get enough of Talking Pictures Trivia? Head on over to our website, YouTube channel, or where you normally listen to Talking Pictures Trivia, to find the B-side, where we talk about the movies you love. Talking Pictures Trivia B-side goes further into the movies we talk about on this podcast and compares them to other media that has been on our mind. Here's a quick sample.
In this B-side, I'm going to argue that Back to the Future Part 2 is about the construction of father figures and the making of that which was never there. What I'm going to do is start by talking about Baudrillard and his philosophy, go through his most famous book, Simulacra and Simulation, and then talk about that in relation to hyperreality and various Baudrillard concepts. And then we're going to connect that to Back to the Future Part 2 and a little bit of Back to the Future Part 1. The argument from Simulacra and Simulation is that our current media-saturated society has replaced the real, or replaced reality, with symbols and signs, and our experience of reality is a simulation of reality, not the thing itself.
Flip this record over by heading to TalkingPicturesTrivia.com, our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts to hear more on the B-side.
And we're back. Doug, we're at the pivotal point of our episode where we ask the guests a key question. If you could watch The Matrix with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be? And please don't say the director or one of the main actors.
Yeah. I
Joking, whatever you want.
I would say, if this was real, I'd probably have to say Keanu Reeves, just because I'm a big fan of his.
I knew it.
But as a strange alternate, which would be, I don't know, probably mean, but as an alternate, I would say Will Smith, who famously passed on making The Matrix in favor of making Wild Wild West. So good choice.
I still think he's done okay overall.
He's done pretty well. So I don't think he's kicking himself that much.
I want to know what the song would sound like that he'd write.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. Yeah. The Matrix doesn't have a lovely beat he can do with was it Drew Hill, right?
It would be a whole different movie. We may not be talking about it.
Doug, going back to your first question, would you want 1999 Keanu Reeves or current day Keanu Reeves, or?
I think it would have to be current day Keanu Reeves. I think 1999 Keanu Reeves probably wouldn't have understood as much about the movie.
Do you think he's changed that much, or just the movies he's gotten to change?
Well, I mean, 20 years you've grown in, gotten older, done some other stuff, reacted with fans and all that.
I think I'd like to watch it with Bill and Ted. Keanu Reeves.
Or just Bill and Ted. Like
Keanu Reeves is one of those actors who's like, he seems like in the last few years, in the last maybe 5-6 years, he's redeemed himself, but we don't know from what.
He's pretty popular in John Wick, right? A lot of people like.
Yeah, it was John Wick, but he's also become like this kind of beloved person. More, people apparently he is a very nice man and very easy to work with. And in the last few years, apparently, like, people have discovered this and are quite ready to celebrate him.
And that's what I mean. I think 20 years ago, he was probably similar to how he is now. He just, the roles he had made him look, a little less intelligent, but I think he enjoyed it. I think part of being the apparent genuinely nice guy was he would do those roles and he didn't mind that everybody was mocking him for saying, whoa, these kind of things.
Yeah.
So. That was my word.
He's also had like a bit of a tragic life, if you look at his life.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. He had a few rough experiences, none of which I think were his fault.
It's time for question 3.
When is the first mention of humans being batteries for the machines?
Locked In?
I'll say Locked In, but I have a side note to mention when I give my answer.
I have a idea, but I think it's wrong.
Those are my favorite answers.
Yeah. Okay, locked in, and I guess I'm going first. Huh?
Let's hear it. I think that's why KJ just gets that quick locked in there.
Yeah, I'm gonna say we're not time stamping, right?
Nope.
No, okay. I'm gonna go on a risk because I there's one I know, and I'm not gonna say that because I think the reason for this question is this kind of trick. I'm gonna say when Trinity meets Neo for the first time in that 90s rock nightclub.
Doug.
So the explicit mention is when Morpheus tells him when they're in the simulation, and then there's all the kind of like flashing around with showing the bodies and stuff. But the indirect mention that came before that, the earliest I can remember is when they're in the car when they're getting on their way to get Neo out. Switch calls him Copper Top.
And KJ.
Wow, Doug, that's quite an insult. Copper Top. I also went just when Morpheus they had that kind of cool CRT TV and they were explaining the thing. So kind of early on in that was when they first mentioned the humans' batteries.
The 2 points go to Doug. He's absolutely right. When they're in the car and he's been bugged, okay? Switch says, listen to me, Copper Top. We don't have time for 20 questions. So Doug gets the points. Let's talk about the machines, the different programs inside the Matrix, outside the Matrix, the portrayal of the machines and their role in this futuristic society.
So the Sentinels looked really good for 1999, huh? Right? This is early CG. I thought the Sentinels.
All of it looked good for 1999. Right? Some of it looks better than movies I've seen now, which actually blows my mind.
The bug was real cool. It's in his body, it's out of his body. It ties back to the scene where he's interrogated. I thought the machines were great. I loved Hugo Weaving's speech about us being a virus and the machines were great.
Classic.
Though it doesn't quite make sense that they'd make us into batteries.
I'm pretty sure I read the original script is they were using us as the computer to power the Matrix, which also doesn't make that much sense.
Sort of circular, right?
Yeah. And the batteries, like, why not cows? Wouldn't that have been easier? Or
cow Matrix.
Cow Matrix. The Mootrix.
Morpheus.
You're the utter one.
I think I also heard it was a neural network. That was
literally.
That's why they no. That in the original script they were trying to make a neural network and people didn't know what that was, so they turned it into.
Got it.
I still think I'll give them some.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. It's
the battery. Yeah. I mean,
I
maybe they know a way to do it better than we do. I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's not the point. The point is they could be doing it for revenge if you want that. As the idea is that they have a good reason to do it. The machines are fun. We actually don't spend that much time with them either. I think that's part of it too, is that we spend most of the time. The technology that impresses us is the sort of the slow motion and the movements of the characters in the film. It's not the it's again, like, I think episode 2 of Star Wars is the best comparison because they're so very different, and Star Wars episode 2 is just loaded with graphics. It's just kind of covering you with it, and this is much more interested in developing a particular aesthetic.
No, I was going to say a green and black tinted aesthetic.
Well, the color palette has much to be desired, but I mean the aesthetic in terms of the movement, right? The way these characters move, the kind of the advertisement that I remember seeing very distinctly in my living room there in Waldwick, New Jersey, is Keanu Reeves' character bending backwards as the camera goes around him.
Bullet time.
Yeah,
Real time was like the big deal with this film. I know
Yeah.
that's not necessarily machine based, but he's moving like the machines do.
And then that seemed to happen via just a collection of fast shutter cameras. I don't even think, I think the jacket was CGI, but I don't think anything else was there, was it? And so that it seemed to be more clever. It almost seems as if the inheritor of this is Ex Machina from our earlier episode, which used special effects in a very slight and subtle way. And though I would not call this movie slight or subtle,
Subtle, yeah.
yeah, I think its use of CGI actually was.
I agree, Tom. Why do you keep comparing it to episode 2 from 3 years after this film?
Because the way not to use special effects.
Got it.
Yeah, he just threw everything up there just to do it. And then
yeah.
Perfect example.
Yep. Yeah.
What I was also bringing up with the machines, though, there's physical machines and then there's programs, which are all part of this machine-based society, such as Agent Smith and other things that I can't talk about because they're in the later films. But yeah, like there are.
Well, and the Oracle, right? The Oracle was wonderful.
Yeah. Well, she's a program.
You can't talk about them. These movies came out 20 years ago. Yeah.
Okay, I was trying to stay within universe of this film. We don't know about the Oracle until later. No,
she's in this one. She's a major.
She's in the movie. Yeah.
No, software. We don't know that she is a machine.
Oh,
That's what I mean. When I say machine, I'm blanketing machine society, but that's what's interesting. There's physical machines and then there's programs, which are, I would label as machine software in this universe. That's the one though, Cage. The Oracle we find out later is.
I guess it is confirmed in the later movies. So back in 1999, everybody's minds was blown by The Matrix and it was really good. But all I kept thinking is, isn't this just a sequel to the Terminator movie where John Connor fails? Like, I didn't understand why it was such a big deal.
The Terminator was a big deal too, but it's also the Terminators are looking to exterminate everyone. The pernition of the Matrix, not the pernition, excuse me, the abuse that the Matrix machine is, or what you ever call whoever runs that thing, is that they are looking to enslave, right? And there's something particularly gruesome about slavery over death. One just wants to kill you, one wants to control you. And I think that's
the Matrix is control.
yeah, exactly. That's probably what was so appealing to people, especially young people, about this. You feel society's controlling you, and that if you really know what's going on, you could look.
Yeah, just young people, right?
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah, people of all ages. So I think there's something that speaks to our own world, because the Matrix, in one sense, the machinery of it is generating a narrative in which people live, and a narrative has it. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a false or true binary, but a narrative is a construct. It rejects the concept of a true false dichotomy itself, and I think that's far more interesting than kill them all. Skynet wins, that type of thing.
It's time for question 4.
How long has Cipher, played by Joe Pantaliano, been unplugged from the Matrix? The closest number without going over wins. Price is Right rules.
Locked in. Damn it.
Oh no, that's not good for Tom. Doug's not sure.
I think I'm pretty sure.
Locked in?
KJ?
Yeah, I am not so sure. I don't know, 8 years?
I believe it's Tom.
Yeah, I'm going to say 9 years.
Doug?
11 years.
No, it's 9 years.
It is. Oh, great. I was so sure. And Doug seemed so sure. And I thought, well, I can't beat Doug.
9 years. It was 9 years.
I didn't
fact
even
check me if you want, but there was
I didn't even know what copper top meant.
So that was the scene where he was talking with the agents in the Matrix and explaining how he knows it's not a stake and all of that stuff. And he wants to go back in. 9 years he was outside of the system. So we have a tie, but before we get into the tiebreaker, let's talk a little bit about prophecy, because Cipher, as we talked about earlier, was a non-believer. And we have talked a bit about this topic earlier, but if there's any remaining thoughts regarding how prophecy is treated in this film.
There's an interesting element to prophecy in this that relates to Neo, because Neo does not like the idea of fate, right? We learned this. Doug, that was your word, right? Was fate. And because he feels that fate is controlling him, and the Matrix is control, and the prophecy and these kind of religious ideas are freedom from control. So the way the movie is positing fate is that it isn't necessarily destiny, that these things are different, but that it is the belief in the possibility of freedom, right? It's the belief in the possibility of self-determination, and the idea of a prophet being there to kind of tell you, this is what's going to happen in the future. It's depicted as guidance, not as a necessity. This isn't definitely going to happen, but this is how we get on the right path again. I think that's what's going on there, because there is this problem with fate and free will that's kind of going on in the background of this movie. And I think this movie doesn't want to see faith or fate as necessarily entirely deterministic.
This may be a bit off topic to the Matrix universe, but for some reason, for all us Dune fans out there, this reminded me a lot of the Bene Gesserit.
Mhm.
It's an order that not only makes whispers and creates prophecy, but they do it over centuries. So they'll pick hints of a prophet to come. And I feel like that's how the Matrix almost handled it. They're creating this environment to give faith and hope that such a being will come and then will be embraced if and when it does come. So it's a bit of a stretch, but it directly reminded me of that, specifically on this watch, because I recently have read and watched the newest rendition of Dune. So just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, the difference, though, I'd say, is the Kwisatz Haderach, which is the figure that they're looking for in Dune, that the Bene Gesserit, they're doing it through breeding, but it ends up being through breeding and through contact with the spice, blah blah blah. But the Kwisatz Haderach, while it's a kind of a great leader, it's also a martial leader who brings destruction upon the universe. I mean, I think Paul, the main character, the Kwisatz Haderach in Dune, kills
Spoilers,
something.
everybody. Spoilers.
Spoilers. Sorry,
Yeah,
this is spoilers for a movie that has not yet been made. Paul ends
Well, a
up
book that was written, what, 50,
a book that was
70
written
years ago?
Yeah.
but so Paul in the follow-up kills about 70 billion people once he becomes the leader and the Kwisatz Haderach. And so the movie, and I think the most recent movie does this pretty well, is it shows the kind of fated leader as a terrible thing. Paul is going to become something worse than the villains of the picture. In this, it's really not about the dangers of the messianic figure, but it celebrates the messianic figure as what messianic figures always do, at least in kind of the stories, which is they liberate.
I also really liked Morpheus as the prophet and his relationship with the prophecy, right? So he's a firm believer. And the scene where he goes back and picks up Neo from the Oracle, and Neo's like, Morpheus, the Oracle told you exactly what you need to hear. Like, he gets it. He understands how the Oracle works and all these, how the faith is supposed to work and the fate. I mean, it's questioned in future movies, even by Morpheus, but I really enjoyed the way the movie presented faith and fate, not as an absolute, but in the end, it turns out to be right anyway. Like, it turns out to be right anyway.
It's in danger. It's something that's, God, I hate the word true in this movie, but I think it applies. It's something that's true, but that is in danger.
It's time for a bonus question.
Now for the tiebreaker. KJ, you can play along as well because this one is worth 3 points.
Ooh.
Oh. What if only KJ gets it?
Then we have another
A
tiebreaker.
3-point three-way tie.
Oh, that sounds
Okay.
so dirty.
So, when was the Nebuchadnezzar built?
Ooh, locked
Closest
in.
without going over.
I think locked in. I think I know it.
Locked in, and I have no idea.
Locked in. I have a guess. I have it written in my notes on the side, but I'm not going to look.
Oh, I'm gonna look.
Okay, Doug, you're going to start this one up.
I'm going to say 2069.
KJ.
40 years ago.
Tom.
I'm gonna say I had locked in 2075. I think it's 2060 though.
Doug is going to take down this episode. He
Was it
got it
2060?
exactly.
Oh.
2069.
Mhm.
This is why in one of the earlier questions I said that they probably didn't name it that. They inherited that because when Neo is talking to Morpheus, or really Morpheus is talking to Neo about when the real time is, he explains to Neo that they think it appears to be 1999, but the world is probably closer to 2199. And if the Nebuchadnezzar was built in 2069, they most likely inherited, salvaged, found this ship at some point. So I don't think they are the ones who named it, period. So it's a lucky coincidence that has any connection or correlation.
Yeah, it's just an interesting name that they would pick for this. But
There's also a few other weird references. I mean, I guess it's not that weird because The Matrix is 1999, but even Tank and Dozer, who were born and raised in Zion, so they presumably can't and never have been to The Matrix, they make pop culture references to the 90s and 60s. I should have written them down, but I was surprised that they included some more recent pop culture references in the movie.
Keep in mind, they stare at the
That's
Matrix
true.
all day long, though, especially the operators. I'm
Mhm,
not saying
mhm.
everyone in Zion,
That's
but
true. Yeah, that's where
specifically
they
the
get 'em.
operators.
what are the pop culture references?
Yeah, I should have written them down. I
Yeah.
forget if it was Batman or they would say catchphrases from other things. But
Oh, Superman.
there it is.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Like cereal
Yes.
commercials. Yep.
Mhm.
Hey, Mikey, I think he likes it.
Man, imagine you
Yeah.
stare at the Matrix all day and that's what you got out of it. I mean,
I wonder if the TV is any good, right? like on the Matrix. I bet they like one of the reasons why this is what they should have put in the movie. Them watching the Matrix of a television program, and not like shirking their work or whatnot, or not getting on to a job they have to do because they're really absorbed in a television program they're seeing in the code of the Matrix. That would be the most Matrix thing that the movie could possibly do.
Yeah.
I don't know why that just made me remember that I thought I was really cool because I had a screensaver that was the Matrix letters like coming down. Oh, come on. You all probably had it at some point.
I had the little Microsoft
Oh, yeah, I had
Word
that too.
or the DOS thing.
I think I downloaded it from the website.
I might have as well. That was probably the marketing campaign.
So one thing I did notice was that when Neo is fighting Morpheus, they're actually watching them fight on monitors, and they're not actually looking at the code. So although technically that's not the Matrix,
Exactly. That's a separate program to simulate
but it's still
the
yeah,
Matrix.
but it's still in code. So maybe they don't always watch it in code. Can you imagine watching sitcoms in code as opposed to visual?
I feel like they said that the computers couldn't handle the data from it, so you had to watch it in code. Not the program, Tom, Doug, that you're talking about, but the actual Matrix. I think you could not physically, like the computers could not process a direct live visual feed.
I remember something like that. Yeah, because that's when
because he's like, this is all I see is blonde,
Yeah.
brunette. Like it was that
yeah,
conversation.
it It was during the
Cipher.
exposition dump montage. Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's time for Movie Rant.
So watching this, and I want to give a shout out to a YouTube channel that has more viewers than us, and hopefully this will get us some more attention, as the CCK Philosophy channel, which is a really good, it's about 25-minute video on Baudrillard and the Matrix that I watched in prep for this, and I'd recommend that. And he makes, can I say this? He makes the argument that kind of like that Baudrillard made. So Baudrillard, the philosopher, was actually invited to partake in the Matrix, and there's two references to him in the movie. When Neo has the book, remember at the very beginning he has a book, and that's where he hides the discs for his illegal disc activity thing. He's hiding it.
Still don't know what that was, by the way.
Oh, what his
Still don't know
business?
what
Yeah,
that was.
whatever it was. But the discs were in a copy of Simulacrum and Simulation. And then also Morpheus's thing, the desert of the real, welcome to the desert of the real. There's also a Baudrillard quote. But Baudrillard like famously hated this movie, and when he was invited to work on the latter two sequels, he turned them down. And his reason for this, and I think it's actually a little confusing, but I like this channel because it kind of unpacked it in a very sensible way, was that what the Matrix, the film, is offering us is like an option between reality and kind of this kind of postmodern situation, right? Where you're sort of everything is a simulation and nothing is real and everything is kind of about control. And what kind of Baudrillard's critique of the movie is that like the modern world in which we live in, the real just isn't there anymore, right? That all that there is kind of control and narrative, right? And there's like no space outside of narrative anymore. Though Baudrillard suggests one way out might be through faith. And so his problem with the movie is that it's kind of binary, right? There's reality or there's not reality. There isn't this suspension of the option of reality or the inability to see one from the other. However, I think that what we're talking about here with the oracle and faith and that type of thing, just during this episode, listening to you guys, makes me think that, maybe Baudrillard was a little kind of, maybe he didn't take that into consideration, right? That faith, that belief in something, even if it isn't something necessarily tangible in the way the quote unquote real world is tangible, is still a means out of control, both in the real world, this world in which we are in, as well as in the Matrix. See that channel and then connect us to that channel somehow, audience, and so we could get more views.
I have something that I just wanted to bring up that I noticed for the first time on this watch that I never noticed before. The beginning of this movie where we're introduced to Trinity, and the end of this movie where Neo has his final showdown with Agent Smith, is the same setting. It is the heart.
This is why
the
Smith was
City
waiting for him
Hotel.
in the room.
I never noticed that before.
Like he looked at the sign and he noticed that it was the same place that they found Trinity. So he beat him to the room. Room 303, by the way.
Exactly. Yes, it is room 303. But I don't know why I didn't make that connection ever before when I watched it.
That's where he first meets Trinity. Where is that?
No, that's when we first meet Trinity in the opening sequence when she's talking on the phone, and that where the final phone is to get out of the Matrix. He says he found an old phone or something like that.
Yeah.
Which how could it be an old phone if they just used it recently? But anyway, yeah,
an old exit.
Old exit.
Well, actually, I think it was months had passed since they actually plugged Neo out.
That's true. The time.
He grew hair since then.
That's true. That is true.
And she didn't use that phone, right? That was the phone booth she used outside
to get out.
Well, they cut the hard line.
They cut the hard line in the building,
so she couldn't actually get out.
It.
And she had to get out.
So somebody
I guess they.
Your men are already dead.
Hold.
that scene.
So I would be remiss if I didn't bring up boundaries between the mundane world and the fantastic
Mhm.
world, right? It's my favorite thing to do on the show. What I liked about The Matrix is we're way more familiar with the fantastic
Mhm.
world than the mundane world. So it's kind
Yep.
of cool to see the reverse. And then what I love about that is the boundaries. So I really enjoyed that the boundary was the phones and the computers and how you could kind of peek through one way or the other using a terminal, right? I really enjoyed the representation of that boundary in this film.
Yeah, that was really spot on.
Yeah.
Even now it held up. Even when I was talking about technology and questioning how a viewer, I'm not discounting that it felt old or dated. It's still like that movie feels like it could have been released recently.
Yeah, the boundary thing is interesting. The place where the fantastical or or the hyper real contacts the real, where they're joining, because that's also the place of both salvation and greatest danger, right? That's where they're constantly almost being killed or what have you. Or the escape is thwarted because Trinity just had to tell him something right then and there and couldn't wait 40 seconds. Yeah. So it's interesting to see the boundary between the hyperreal and the real, or the fantasy, as dangerous. Where where the map touches the terrain, right? To use the Baudrillardian or the Borges metaphor. That place kind of, it's interesting when the map touches the terrain, it like crumbles, right? It's a little dangerous here. There's a lot more friction here. I wonder whether that is. Why do you think that is?
They needed a plot.
Yep. Yeah. Plot mechanics. Yeah.
Deep.
Mhm.
Give me an exit.
Yeah. So you want to have some gripes with the movie? Some things
That's not a bad idea, actually.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Neo has no personal characteristics whatsoever, except he ate at a noodle shop. We know he likes noodles and is sometimes late for work.
But he's a shut-in, right? Like that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
He's living a dual life. He does this
He
whatever he needs to do during the day to survive, and then he does all the computer. I mean, he's not very
interesting.
yeah, exactly. But I don't think he was supposed to be of that world.
Yeah.
That's why he was kind of
Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite scenes is when he goes back to his desk after getting chewed out by his boss. He's just sitting there and the screen is blank. He's just not doing anything.
Like the man there's no characteristic, there's no personality there. There's not really any with Trinity either, other than she can break into the IRS, which that's good in my book. But there isn't a lot of character development in any of these characters, with the exception maybe of Morpheus, which I think is why I like the Oracle scene so much, because there was actually humor in that scene. It was kind of, there's a little bit of funny, like when she says, I know you're cute. I could see why she likes you. Who? Not too bright though.
Yeah, that
It
was
a nice little
great.
joke. Yeah. I thought that was warm. And I'll say another thing about some of the action sequences, namely the smart gun into the room where Morpheus is to free Morpheus towards the end of the film. I have absolutely no idea how he was firing that gun. It's like he clearly can't seem to see where he's firing at all. Like the action sequence is like impossible to make out. I say, so some of the action sequences moved into kind of shock and awe over sensibility, and so that was one of them where I'm like, he has no idea where Morpheus is based upon the POV of the POV that the camera is giving us. So that was like another little gripe I had with the picture.
Yeah, Morpheus shouldn't have survived that, right? Neo should have been the cause
Neo
of death.
yeah, exactly. Neo could not see where he was firing.
I'd like to once again congratulate our winner of the week, which is Doug. And he had a strong showing today. So you definitely earned that one.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Very good.
Thank you.
I know Kung Fu. You can find more of our content wherever you listen to podcasts, on our YouTube channel, Twitter @Talking Studios, and our website, talkingpicturestrivia.com. We're extremely grateful to all of those who subscribe, like, follow, and leave a review. Do you believe we're in a simulation? Why or why not? Let us know on Twitter, talkingpicturestrivia@gmail.com, or give us a call at 201-467-8679. Thanks again, Doug, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You can find me on Twitter at ThomasLehman15, and stay tuned for our Talking Pictures Trivia B-side, our sister podcast. Look into it.
And you can find me on Twitter at KJ10001000.
I can also be found on Twitter at The Nicknamed. Join us next time when we discuss Tom's recommendation from 1973, World on a Wire. Stay tuned for our first impressions of this film.
Ding, 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 ding.
So the movie is World on a Wire from 1973. And let me correct that. It technically was a German miniseries. What were your initial first impressions?
So we decided to do The Matrix 4, which audience get hype. It's coming up. We're going to do it here in a few weeks. And leading up to that, we decided to do Matrix adjacent movies. So I had a really fun time going through a bunch of movies, looking for a fun Matrix adjacent movie. I tried Ghost in a Shell, Dark Cities, Paprika. That was actually really good. Open Your Eyes. There was a remake with Tom Cruise, Vanilla Sky. And then Ryan had suggested The 13th Floor. So I checked that out. But after seeing the first 10 minutes of World on a Wire, I knew this was going to be the movie. I watched it on my phone, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it, all 3 hours and a half. And yeah, it's a movie I can imagine watching again and again and again, because it takes forever to watch. I already feel like I've been watching it most of my life, and I really enjoyed it.
This is only my second Fassbinder film. I saw Ali Fear Eats the Soul a number of years ago, and I'm somewhat illiterate when it comes to German New Wave. So the I've seen, Paris, Texas. I've seen a few of of what's his name? Of Werner Herzog films. But generally, I just don't know German New Wave very well, and I especially don't know Fassbinder very well. So this, at least, despite possibly not enjoying this film very much, at least it was a nice cultural institution to German New Wave. I watched the Criterion collection of it, which includes a short documentary on its making, which isn't particularly informative, and also a brief interview with Ryan Johnson, which is even less informative. But the restored version does look nice. It has a few little add-ons that make the Criterion edition worth it. Would I say this is worth the 3.5 hours? Well, I'll say this. I think it is more Matrixy than The Matrix. I think it does what The Matrix was trying to do a lot better.
Whoa.
You guys are all going to go on and on about sentience and consciousness, red pill, blue pill, blah, 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 blah. But I am going to make the strong case that this was 40 years in the making advertisement for millennials to buy furniture. And that's all I have to say about that.
I didn't look at it from that angle, but I see the validity there. I really don't have any qualms with the movie on a whole, aside from that it really dragged at the ending. But I will say, and I'm going to throw this at KJ, while it may have been a perfect complement to The Matrix, it's not a perfect complement to my weekly schedule. So this was a true nail biter to finish on time, especially due to the German subtitles. But, I am glad I watched it, and I'm glad I got through it. Now, what I will say too, I think the thing I enjoyed the most is the name Fassbinder. It's just a really cool name. So I'm glad I watched one of his movies. At the end of round one, we have a tie between Tom and Doug at 1 point apiece. And KJ, so nice of you to join us today. I'm sure there's going to be more points being delivered in round two, right after these messages from our valued sponsor.
1 point apiece. Delicious.
Did I say peach?
Yeah.
It's fine.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm gonna replay that because I don't want it to say that. How far back do I have to go?
At least to the peach.
I shouldn't have said anything.
My
I
guess
don't
is
even
you were,
like
you, were,
peaches.
you were thinking a piece or each, and it just
Yeah.
combined to a peach.
That's exactly what happened.